Not everything you bring home from a trip is just a memory. Some souvenirs carry more than dust from another country. They carry something you were never meant to invite through your front door. You packed it with excitement. You placed it on your shelf. You showed it to your friends. And you had no idea what you were really bringing home with it. Today, I want to open your eyes to something most Christians never think about when they travel. We are going to talk about 7 souvenirs you should never bring home from a trip and why what you carry back can end up carrying something back with it. Deuteronomy 7:26 gives us a warning most believers assume was only for ancient Israel. Do not bring a detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. Regard it as vile and utterly detest it, for it is set apart for destruction. But the principle behind this verse never expired. What you carry into your home, you are inviting into your life. Let's go through each one carefully. 1. Never bring home an idol or statue of another god. This is the most common souvenir mistake and the one Christians defend the fastest. I remember a couple who came back from a trip overseas, glowing about a beautifully carved figure they'd found in a local market. It was intricately detailed, clearly handmade, and in their words, too beautiful not to buy. They placed it on a shelf in their living room as a decorative piece, a conversation starter for guests. At first, I thought nothing of it either. It's just art, right? But the more I looked into what that figure actually represented, the more uneasy I became. It wasn't decoration in the culture it came from. It was worship. It was made to be bowed to, prayed to, offered to. Listen to me carefully. An idol does not stop being an idol just because it's sitting in your living room instead of a temple. 1 Corinthians 10:20 says plainly, "The sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God, and I do not want you to be participants with demons." That statue was never neutral. It was made for one purpose, to represent a God that is not the Lord. Displaying it in your home is not appreciation of culture. It is unknowingly giving a seat to something you were never meant to entertain. 2. Never bring home anything from an occult or spiritual shop. This is the souvenir that comes wrapped in charm, folklore, and a smiling shopkeeper who insists it will bring you luck. I met a young woman once who returned from a trip with a small pouch a street vendor had given her, a blend of herbs, bones, and a written incantation folded inside, sold as a protection charm for travelers. She thought it was harmless tourist novelty. She kept it in her purse for months. But here's what she didn't realize. That vendor wasn't selling souvenirs. He was selling spiritual assignments, and she had unknowingly agreed to carry one home with her. Acts 19:19 shows us exactly how seriously the early church took this. New believers in Ephesus who had practiced sorcery brought their scrolls together and burned them publicly. Scrolls worth a small fortune because they understood something we've forgotten. You cannot casually own an object built for spiritual manipulation and expect it to have no effect on your life. If a market is known for charms, potions, spells, or blessings from anyone other than God, walk past it. Do not let curiosity cost you your peace. 3. Never bring home something you took without permission from a sacred site. This one feels small. A stone, a shell, a piece of carved wood picked up just because. But smallness does not mean harmlessness. I clearly remember standing near the ruins of an ancient temple with a group of tourists, watching a man slip a broken fragment of carved stone into his backpack when he thought no one was looking. It wasn't for sale. It wasn't given to him. He simply took it because it was old, because it was interesting, because no one stopped him. Something deep inside me felt very unsettled watching that happen, because this is not a new story. Joshua 7 tells us about a man named Achan who took devoted items from Jericho that God had specifically commanded no one to touch. He hid them under his tent, believing no one would ever know. But that single act of quiet disobedience brought defeat and judgment on the entire camp of Israel, not because the object itself was powerful, but because taking what was set apart, without permission, without blessing, is an act of spiritual trespassing. When you take something from a place that was built for worship, whether ancient ruins, a shrine, or sacred ground, you are not just breaking a rule of respect, you may be carrying home something that was never released to you in the first place. If this message is already making you think twice about something sitting on your shelf right now, brother, sister, please subscribe to this channel and write in the comments, "Lord, examine what I have brought into my home." Now, let's continue, because the next 4 souvenirs are the ones almost no one warns you about. 4. Never bring home a ritual mask or ceremonial object used to contact spirits. This is the souvenir that looks the most impressive on a wall and carries the heaviest history behind it. I remember visiting the home of a man who proudly displayed an entire collection of tribal masks from his travels, each one mounted with a small plaque describing where he'd found it. One of them, he explained with a laugh, was used in a village ceremony to call down the ancestors. He thought it made for a great story at dinner parties. But masks like that were never crafted as art. They were crafted as instruments, tools, built specifically to open a channel between the wearer and a spirit realm outside of God's authority. The craftsmanship may be beautiful. The purpose behind it was never beautiful. Leviticus 19:31 warns us directly, "Do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritists, for you will be defiled by them." You may not be seeking anything when you hang that mask on your wall, but the object itself was made for exactly that purpose, and purpose does not disappear just because the ceremony ended. Some souvenirs are not decorations. They are doorways someone else built, and you are the one now living next to it. 5. Never bring home anything taken from a tomb, grave, or burial site. This one is quiet. It doesn't look dangerous. It looks historical. I once heard a traveler describe, almost casually, finding a small clay fragment near an ancient burial ground and slipping it into his bag as a keepsake, practically falling apart already. He said, "No harm in taking one piece." He meant no disrespect. He simply didn't think of it as anything more than old dirt and old stone. But Scripture treats what surrounds the dead with a seriousness we've largely forgotten. Numbers 19:11 tells us that even touching a human corpse brought ceremonial uncleanness under the law, a principle designed to teach reverence, not superstition. Burial ground is not a gift shop. What rests there was placed there in mourning, in ritual, in finality. Taking from it even a fragment, even out of innocent curiosity, is taking something you were never given. If you feel that tug of "it's just a small piece," no one will miss it. The next time you're standing somewhere people were laid to rest, that tug is worth listening to. Leave it exactly where it lies. 6. Never bring home a charm you now trust more than God. This is the most personal one on this list because it doesn't just sit on your shelf. It rides in your pocket, your car, around your neck. I know a woman who came home from a trip with a small charm sold to her as a protection piece meant to ward off bad luck and evil intent. She wore it every single day after that. And slowly, without realizing it, she stopped praying for safety before she traveled. She would just touch the charm instead and feel calm. The habit was subtle. The shift in her heart was not. Jeremiah 17:5 gives us a sobering line. "Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord." That charm was never evaluated for what it was made of. It was evaluated for what it replaced. Anything you reach for instead of prayer, anything you trust to protect you the way only God can protect you, has quietly taken a seat that was never meant for it. Bring home a photograph. Bring home a story. But do not bring home a substitute for your faith. 7. Never bring home a secret you're afraid to tell your family about. Of all 7, this is the one that reveals the true condition of your heart. Remember Achan, back in Joshua 7, the man who took what he was forbidden to take and then hid it under his own tent. The item itself was dangerous, but notice what made it worse. He concealed it. He knew it was wrong the moment he buried it beneath his own feet, hoping no one would ever ask. If you've brought something home from a trip and you find yourself hesitant to explain where it came from, quietly placing it in a drawer instead of on display, changing the subject when someone asks, that hesitation is not nothing. It is your own conscience trying to warn you. Proverbs 28:13 tells us plainly, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." The problem was never just the object. The problem is a heart that already knows something is wrong and chooses silence instead of surrender. Every one of us has come home from a trip with something we didn't fully think through, a trinket, a curiosity, a why not. This message is not meant to make you afraid of travel or afraid of every market stall and street vendor you pass. God is not calling you to live in paranoia. He is calling you to live with discernment. Psalm 101:3 gives us the heart behind everything we've talked about today. I will not look with approval on anything that is vile. I hate what faithless people do. I will have no part in it. That is not a verse about souvenirs. It is a verse about ownership, about deciding, before you ever step into another market in another country, what you will and will not allow a seat in your home. Not every object is evil. Not every carving is cursed. But when something is made for worship that isn't God's, made for a ceremony you don't understand, or taken from a place you had no right to take from, leave it there. Bring home the memory. Leave behind anything that was never yours to carry. If this message opened your eyes today, I want you to do one thing right now. Write in the comments, Lord, examine my home and my heart. That is a simple declaration, but it is one God takes seriously. And if you know someone with a trip coming up, someone who wanders into markets without a second thought, share this with them before they go. It could be the word that protects their home before they ever pack a bag. Don't forget to subscribe to Bible Truth Zone so we can keep growing together in biblical wisdom every single week. God bless you, my brother, my sister. Until next time.